Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing okay. So today we are going to start our online class in science. So this is the lesson for Matthew M.3. So I will be teaching you again this semester. So are you ready to learn? So let's begin. So very first thing that we are going to discuss is the interdependence among organisms. So when we say interdependence, that means to say the dependency or the reliance between them. So how one organism rely from the other organism. So here we're going to learn first these words that we are going to use in this lesson. First off, we have the word habitat. What is the word habitat? So as you can see in the picture, this is the house or the place wherein many fish or many kinds of fishes live. Simply saying, habitat of an organism, the habitat of an organism is the place where it lives. It is the place where the organism obtains its food, where it eats, shelter, where it stays, and protection. It is also the place where the organism reproduces. So they produce the same kind, their own kind. So they make babies. Some examples of habitats are a pond, a school field. So in our school, there is so many habitats that we can find. One example is a tree. So a tree can be a habitat for some birds. And here we also have rocky seashore here. And also a habitat has many kinds of organisms living in it. It means to say there are many kinds, not only one kind of organism, but many. Next up, let's learn this word. This is the word species. So what is a species? Okay, a species is like a group of organisms of same kind, or they do have common characteristics. They are very similar. Species are organisms with common characteristics. They can breed among themselves to produce fertile offspring. Examples of species in the above figure, which I'm going to show to you later, are goldfish, sea turtle, octopus, and seahorse. Now try to look at this one. This is the father fish, the mother fish, and the baby fish, and some other relatives. So as a whole, they belong to the same species of fish. So they do have the same color, they do have the same characteristics. Same thing with the sea turtles. So we can group them as one species. Likewise, with the sea horses, they belong to the same species. And also the goldfish, they are of one species. So this goldfish, they don't belong to the same group as this fish because they do have certain characteristics which are different from the characteristics of the yellowfish. And also we do have octopuses, so they belong also to the same species. So they do have the same characteristics and they can breed to produce offsprings or babies. So the same thing with the other groups. Now, we also have the word population. What is the word population? When you talk about population, all you have to do is to remember the word count, the number. So count the number of fish, count the number of seahorses, count the number of goldfish, count the number of sea turtles, count the number of octopuses. So you just have to count the number of those individuals or organism, each organism in a group. So that is what we call population. So population is made up of a number of organisms of the same species. That's why we can call them a population of seahorses, a population of sea turtles, a population of goldfish, and so on. Other organisms of the same species live and breed in a particular habitat. So population, they live in the same habitat. So examples of populations in the above figure are the population of goldfish, the population of sea turtles, the population of octopuses, and the population of seahorses. Next, we also have this word community. So community, we count them all. All living organisms, they belong to the same community. So different kinds of species of, of animals or organisms, but they belong to the same community. So a community is made up of many populations, like the populations we have on our screen, living together in a particular habitat. So the habitat that they are into or they are living in is the marine habitat, the ocean. All fish, sea turtles, octopuses, seahorses, and corals make up the ocean community. So this is the ocean community wherein many living organisms live and thrive and grow. So we also have this word ecosystem. So what is it? An ecosystem refers to the community of organisms living in the same habitat together with the non-living components. That means to say we have these sand, water, air, they are non-living components. So all those living components that we can see, most of them here we have mentioned already, but we do have also here this seaweeds, the corals, the snails. They are also living organisms, right? So we have a specific term that we use to describe them. An ecosystem is made up of biotic components. That's the way we call the living components. And abiotic components. That's the way we call the non-living components. All the organisms found in the ocean, fish, sea turtles, seahorses, octopuses, corals, and seaweeds, are all the non-living components such as rock, sand, water, air, and mineral make up an ocean ecosystem. So this is the ocean ecosystem. So we can also call it as marine ecosystem. Examples of other ecosystems are a forest ecosystem like this. So in the forest, we can see the macaw, we can see the tiger, the monkey, and many other animals living here. So this is what we call forest ecosystem. Of course, marine ecosystem is the ocean. So we have the sea turtle, so many colorful fish, different kinds of fishes, and also the corals, and some other things. So here we also have this wetland ecosystem, the pond, we have the turtle, we have the frogs, we have the water lilies. So they make up the wetland ecosystem. And we also have the grassland ecosystem. So we can usually see this one in Africa. If you are familiar with the word safari, so that is an example of a grassland ecosystem. So in a grassland ecosystem, usually we can find these beautiful animals. We have the giraffe, the tiger, the lion, we have the elephant, the rhinoceros. Okay, and most of the time there are a few trees around, and mostly it is populated with giraffes. Now, let's have this as our example on how to explain the ecosystem, because ecosystem has many habitats included in it. So many organisms, different habitats. So as a whole, they make up an ecosystem. So example, let's have this paddy field. Paddy field is not only a one kind of habitat. So paddy field has so many places wherein many kinds of many organisms of different kinds live together. So a paddy field is as a whole will become our ecosystem, and it has all the living components in it. which is what we call community, and also the non-living components in it. So what are those non-living components? Of course, we have first, we have soil, air, water, and minerals. So they are the non-living components. How about the living components? So living components make different populations, right? From community, so of course we have ecosystem as the biggest unit. Next up is community, still a big unit. And under community, we have populations. So in this ecosystem of paddy field, we have a population of many paddy plants, which we know most of the time they are um, what we call rice, right? So we also have population of caterpillars. So many caterpillars are present in that paddy field. We have also population of snakes, many snakes around in the paddy field perhaps, and population of birds. So all of these populations, they do have organisms that belong to it, which we call species. So species, different species of paddy plant, different species of caterpillars, different species of snakes, different species of bird. So those are the ecosystem of a paddy field. So remember this one, ecosystem is the biggest unit. Next up is community, and then smaller to that is the population, and the more smaller or much smaller is the species. So we group them as a whole as an ecosystem together with the non-living components. With the living component, we call them community. In that community, we have many populations, and that populations has so many kinds of um, species. So that is the way we group our organisms in an ecosystem. So interdependence of organisms creates a balanced ecosystem. What is a balanced ecosystem? So a balanced ecosystem, it can sustain everyone and everything. So once an ecosystem is not balanced anymore, so it cannot sustain everyone in that or everyone living in that habitat. For example, we as people, we as human beings, we have to eat. If there is no enough food available, so some of the organisms or some people will die. So because they have no access to food. The same thing with the balance with the ecosystem that we have, or all the organisms that living in the ecosystem. So in order for it to be balanced, so there should be an interdependence among them. So examples of those are most plants make their own food by photosynthesis and so are reliant on interaction with non-living components such as sunlight, air, and water. They also require nutrients from the soil. So because of this interaction of the living and non-living components, so plants are able to produce their own food. So here, also animals cannot make their own food, right? And so depend on other organisms for food and on plants for the supply of oxygen. Look at the panda here. So the panda is dependent on the plant, or bamboo, should I say, bamboo plant. So he's having a good time there. So some organisms depend on other organisms for food, shelter, and protection. Like this lizard, so lizard lives on rocks. Some lizards live on rock. So that is their shelter. At the same time, it protects them from some predators. Some depend on rocks and soil for shelter. So this has become the shelter of this lizard. Microorganisms such as bacteria help to decompose dead organisms. As you can see in the picture, the decomposition releases minerals into the soil, which in turn become nutrients for plants. So remember, decomposition is very important for the living things, used to be living things, or to become decomposed. So the nutrients from it goes back to the soil, which will be used later by some other living organisms. And here, some insects, such as bees and butterflies, obtain food like pollen and nectar from flowers. In the process of obtaining food, these insects help in the pollination of flowers. Some plants rely on wind and water for pollination and seed dispersal. So try to look at this one. So bees and butterflies are very important part of our ecosystem because although they get food from the flowers, but they help them to propagate. They help them to become many. So they help with the help of plants, with the help of butterflies and bees and some other insects. So plants are able to reproduce. So try to look at this illustration. Because of the interaction of different organisms in the ecosystem, so there is what we call the balance or the correct way of living, should I say. So these organisms interact with each other that they are able to um, become a useful thing for others. So like the plants are useful for animals, animals are useful for to make some other stuff, um, chemical compounds, and um, in fact, yeah, some fungi and bacteria they help to decompose those used to be living organisms. So they help to decompose them and return back the nutrients to the soil. So here we have here, this is what we call the cycle of the cycle that happens in an ecosystem. So the plants get the carbon dioxide as being part of its food production through photosynthesis and organic compounds made by autotrophs. When we say autotrophs, mostly they are plants. Autotrophs means they are able to produce their own food and consumed by heterotrophs, which mainly animals. And these heterotrophs create organic compounds, and then it goes to decomposition with the help of fungi and bacteria that returns back to the air. So, and also animals sometimes through cellular respiration they produce carbon dioxide. So this is the process. This is a cycle of the air, of production of air, and some other stuff, nutrients in the ecosystem. The interdependence among organisms and the environment creates a balanced ecosystem. A balanced ecosystem is one which does not appear to change very much over a period of time. So a balanced ecosystem most of the time should stay the same as it was before at first. Are some changes, but they are very few. It also provides organisms with all the daily needs such as food, nutrients, gases, water, shelter, and mates. So the interaction of organisms in the environment. So this creates food, nutrients, because of the decomposition through the help of bacteria and fungi, so, and gases, production, gases of carbon dioxide, which the plants need. So water, shelter, and mates, interaction between animals. So they are able to find their mates for its for their reproduction of their own kind, the same species. So in order to maintain a balanced ecosystem, the following factors need to be maintained. So what are those things? First off, the number of individuals in the different populations. So maintaining them is very important. It should not be way over and way less. So because every part of the population is very, very important in the ecosystem. Because most of the time, we always say this one, the populations, organisms in a population are also very dependent from the population of from the organisms of other populations. The number of populations in the different communities. So it should be maintained the composition of gases in the air and the quality of the air. Like for us as people, human being, it's very important that the place that we live in do have quality air. So that's why it's very important because it is to sustain life in that area, and it is very crucial and very important factor for the organisms for them to be productive. So the availability of water, soil, and nutrients. This is very important because without these things, water, soil, and nutrients in the soil, the ecosystem will not be balanced because they are very important to produce or to sustain plants. Those plants produce food for the other living organisms. They are very, very important. So they should be available in that ecosystem. And is all things maintained. So we can say that there is a maintenance or a balanced ecosystem is maintained. Now, I want you to do this one. This is the end of our lesson, but I want you to go back to the video and I want you to find the answers using it by watching it and define each of the following words, such as species, population, community, habitat, and ecosystem. By rewatching the video, I'm sure you're gonna get an idea on how to define these 5 words. Question number 2. Why is the wetland considered as an ecosystem? So to give you an idea, you have to define first the word ecosystem. So what are the factors? What are the things that we have to remember when we talk about ecosystem? And with those answers, you can relate those to the word wetland. So what is a wetland? It is a swamp. So like example of this is a pond. So that is a wetland. So what are those organisms present in there? So that gives you the idea how to answer it. Okay, thank you so much for listening. So that's the end of our lesson for the very first lesson for science. Hope to see you again next time. Bye. God bless.